Late summer or start of the fall season is the time when acorns mature and start to drop. And that's the reason why we use acorns in almost all fall decorations. In today's video, I'm showing you how to make this cute felt acorn to use as your fall decoration essential. Let's start with materials and tools. You'll need felt fabric in your color of choice, matching embroidery floss, some fiber fill for stuffing, a small piece of dried twig, a piece of jute cord if you are planning on decorating the acorn, a hand needle, pins, a pair of scissors, a fabric marking pen, and finally a glue gun. Now let's start our project by simply printing the free PDF pattern. You'll find the link to that in the description. You can then carefully cut out the pattern pieces. This one is a simple pattern and it only has 2 pattern pieces. When you cut the circular pattern piece, only cut along the straight lines and just ignore the dashed lines for now. After your pattern pieces are all set, you can go ahead and use those 2 to cut the required number of felt pieces. Let's start with the bottom piece. You can just pin the pattern piece to the felt fabric and then carefully cut around it like the way I do. You can also use a fabric marking pen to outline the pattern by placing it on top of the felt fabric and then carefully cutting around it. You'll need 4 from the bottom part of the acorn pattern and you can remove the pin once you cut around it. Our next pattern is the circular one and you can do the same for that one too. Even at this point, ignore the triangles in dashed lines for now. First, pin and place the pattern onto a felt fabric and then cut along the circular shape. We only need 1 from this. Finally, remove the pin and now let's see about these dashed lines. Just go ahead and cut out along those dashed lines now. This will remove 4 triangular shapes from the original pattern piece. Then place the altered pattern on top and align with its felt piece. You can even use a pin to hold the 2 pieces together. Now you can easily cut out those triangular parts out from the felt fabric as well. Remove the pin once you are done with that, and there's one more small step we need to do with this top part. As you can see, there is a cross in the middle of the pattern and now it's time to make that same cross on the felt piece as well. First, fold the felt piece in half symmetrically. You can use the 2 removed triangles as a guide when folding it in half. Now make a small cut in the middle and even here you can use the opposite triangular cut as a guide to find the midpoint. Then unfold the felt piece and again fold it in half the other way around. Now make a similar cut at the middle like we did earlier. As you can see now, we got a small cross at the center of the top piece and this is where we are going to place the twig at the end. At this point, we are all ready with the required felt pieces and let's start on sewing. Our next step is optional but it will surely look good if you are up for it. It's a bit of embroidery on all 4 bottom pieces. First, place the template piece on top and align with one of the bottom felt pieces. As you can see, there is a small star shape on the middle of the pattern and using a fabric marking pen, punch holes on the midpoint and 5 end points of that. This will eventually be a hand embroidered flower. Punch holes through the pattern just enough to leave a small mark on the felt piece right below, or you can simply draw this shape on each and every felt piece by hand. Since this is not a complicated thing to draw, I think that will be much easier. After punching basic points, remove the pattern piece and you can highlight the points if needed. Now it's time to hand embroider a flower, and first thread your needle and make a knot at the end. I'm using all 6 strands for this part. From the back of the fabric, insert the needle at the midpoint of the flower and pull it all the way. Then go back down at the same point you just came through. Pull the needle from the other side until it forms a small loop. Now come up at the one of the 5 points and through the formed loop. Gently pull it all the way until it forms a small petal-like shape. Now to secure this formed petal shape, go back down making a short stitch. Pull the needle all the way, and the same goes to the other 4 petals as well to make a complete flower shape. If you are familiar with a bit of hand embroidery, you know this is what we call lazy daisy stitch, and it's the easiest way to embroider a flower. If you want to see the full tutorial and some variation on that, please make sure to follow our tutorial on lazy daisy stitch. I'll leave the link in the description. If you love to do felt crafts like I do, it'll be very useful to learn a few hand embroidery stitches as well. I promise you it will surely come in handy. I hand embroidered small flowers for all 4 pieces for the bottom, and you can either skip it or add more embroidery work to these pieces. Make a couple of knots at the back to secure the stitch once you are done with each and every piece. Finally, trim the thread. Now all 4 bottom pieces are ready, and let's start assembling them. From here on, I'm going to use only 2 thread counts throughout this project. Take 2 of the bottom pieces out of the 4 and place them on the wrong sides facing each other. First thing first, thread your needle with a matching embroidery thread color and make a knot at the end. Now start to sew the 2 margins together from top to the bottom pointy end. Make sure to start in between the 2 felt layers so you can hide away the knot nicely. I'm using whip stitch for assembling the pieces, and you guessed it right, we also have a separate tutorial on that too, in case you don't know how to do that. Blanket stitch is another option, but I think whip stitch is more practical since we need to move from one margin to another. You can stop the sewing once you reach the pointy end of that margin, and now take another bottom piece out of the remaining 2 and then place it aligning with either one of the previous 2. Make sure the wrong sides are facing each other while you are doing so. Now continue to sew along that margin, from the pointy end to the other wider opening end. Once you reach that end, make a knot using the last stitch you just made. Now it's time to assemble the 4th and final piece for the bottom by aligning it with the margin of the 3rd piece. You could continue the same thread for this part since we are going to cover the top opening part at the end. But I feel like it might interfere with things, and because of that I'm going to trim the thread short at this point. You can then start over by making a knot at the end again. Do it as you please. Now let's start with the fourth piece, and like we did with all the other margins, sew it from top to the bottom pointy end. After this point, we are only one more margin away to complete the bottom part of the acorn. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there will be a tiny hole left at the pointy end if we just carry out sewing the final margin. To avoid that, you need to make a couple of stitches in that area from one piece to another to keep things intact and to close the hole at that end. After that, you can start to sew the remaining margin as usual. Once you reach the other end of that margin, make a knot to secure the stitch. Finally, trim the thread. This is how the bottom part of the acorn looks at the end, and we can now move on to the top part. As you know, this top part has 4 removed triangular pieces, and starting from one of those points, fold the 2 edges aligning with each other like this. Now thread your needle with a matching embroidery thread color and make a knot at the end. Then start to sew this small area using the whip stitch. Make sure to start and finish your stitching on the same side of the felt piece. Make a knot when you reach the end, and you can finally trim the thread. Trim it short. Don't keep a long hanging thread. Follow the same steps for the remaining 3 points, and the only important thing is you need to keep all the knots and stitches only on this side of the felt piece. Don't interchange it. Once all 4 points are done, this side is going to be the wrong side and the other side is going to be the right side. I hope you know what I mean. At this point, the top part of the acorn is ready, and let's turn this right side out, so the knots won't be visible to the outside. Give it a gentle push, and that will simply turn it into a more nice and neat roof-like top. This will eventually go on top of the bottom part of the acorn, and let me show you how it goes at the end. Now before assembling these 2 parts, we need to follow one important step, and it's to stuff the bottom of the acorn. Start with a little fiber fill at a time and give it a little push to fill the bottom pointy end. Otherwise, you will see some unfilled crease-like areas at the end. Fill it up to the top, and you can even use a wooden rod with a blunt end to give it a little push. It's not necessary. Check whether all the areas are filled enough before we are moving on to the next step, which is assembling the top and bottom part of the acorn. Place the top roof-like part on top of the bottom piece, and I would like to align those sewn pointy ends at the top with the mid area of each and every bottom piece. There is no particular reason for that. I just think it looks more realistic that way. Now thread your needle and make a knot at the end. Insert the needle from the back of both bottom and top part of the acorn closer to their assembling margin. Pull it all the way. Now here on, use the running stitch to assemble the two layers together all around the opening end. You need to move your needle in and out at the same step when you do this kind of project. We have a detailed tutorial on how to do the running stitch, including all these tips and tricks. Make sure to check that out if you are interested. Simply you prick the both layers at once and then move the needle up and through little further than the first point. From that point, pull the needle all the way. With a bit of practice, you'll be good in no time. Once you reach 3/4 of the way, start to stuff a little bit more to give a plushy look and feel to the top part of the acorn. Carefully stuff a little fiber fill at a time through the small opening we got. When you think it's enough, continue the running stitch until you reach the starting point. After your last stitch, make a couple of knots using the first stitch you made to secure everything in place. Then insert the needle through the acorn and come through somewhere further than your first entry point. Finally, pull the thread towards you and trim the thread. At this point, we are all done with the sewing steps of the acorn and we can now attach the dried twig at the top. I hope you remember that we made a small cut at the center of the top piece to attach the twig. Even though we can insert it through that cut, it won't stay as it is unless we use a bit of hot glue. I rarely use glue in my sewing projects, but I think adding this small twig brings nature inside and I didn't want to miss that. After you applied enough hot glue at one end of the twig, insert that end through the cut we made at the top. Now you need to leave it aside for several minutes until it's dried. Once everything is set, you can tie the twig using a small piece of jute cord or you can leave it as it is. That's totally up to you. Burlaps and jute twine are an essential part of fall decoration. So I'm going to go ahead and make a small tie with this jute cord. You can make a bunch of these to work as ball fillers and it won't even take much time to assemble few of these into a garland. Be creative and come up with your own ways to use these as fall decorations. If you are a big fan of fall, you can make a few of these to give away as gifts for Thanksgiving too. Leave a comment to share your ideas on how we are going to use these in this fall season. I love to read your comments. Thank you all for watching and please subscribe to the channel to see more fun projects. Bye for now and I'll join you in the next one.